Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
All right, welcome in, everybody. It is Sports Daily on a Tuesday. Glad to be here with you. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor with you. Jad Chambers producing, manning that IHOP hotline at 869-1240. Here we go. It is a big Tuesday. It's a big transfer Tuesday. A lot of K-State news to get to in the show today. Monday Night Football in the books. Set football back about 20 years. But, you know, we got it. We got through it. No touchdowns for the winner. Exactly what we all suspected. It's just no good for anybody. No good for bettors. No good for viewers. Nobody likes to see that. All you defensive football, they change the rules for the offense. You're to blame for this. We got to have a little offense. We got to have good quarterback play. We got to have a little offense. But we can get into that a little bit later. Look ahead a little bit for the first time this week. Tommy, how are you this morning?
Man, I'm good. I had to kind of flush my eyes out after watching that Monday Night Football game last night. That was ugly. I mean, I think we all kind of expected it wasn't going to be a great game, knowing that the Vikings don't have Kirk Cousins anymore and Justin Jefferson is out. And then, of course, the Bears have been a debacle all season long. But I don't think anybody really expected. I certainly didn't expect that it was going to be such a terrible game. I had a hard time getting through it, but I mean, it is Monday Night Football, so I had to watch it.
Yeah.
And I kind of regretted sitting through the entire thing, but I did. The good thing was I did notice, and I don't know if you picked up on this, the game didn't take very long. I mean, considering there wasn't a whole lot of scoring, I think it was done before 10 o'clock, which was nice. I'm glad that it got done, as quickly as possible.
Yeah, that was good. I usually go to bed very late, and I've been to bed early lately because I've had this whatever bug that's clear now, and I finally feel good. But yeah, it was. I got to bed pretty quick, and I watched the whole game. I didn't even think about it. It's fun. Like, can we have Justin Fields throw the ball down the field more than like one time at the very last drive of the game? Look, you just have to find out what you're going to do with Fields. And I'm with you. Like, it's Monday Night Football. I'm going to watch it. Even these bad Thursday night football games, I'm going to suffer through them. Monday Night Football, even more than Thursday Night Football. You gotta power through. And this wasn't expected to be a bad game. You had two teams, one especially in Minnesota, who's playing much better lately, and Chicago, who almost beat Detroit with Fields back and everything else. Like that caught me off guard. Sometimes on these, when it's like Jets, whatever, I'm like, yeah, this game's going to stink. That one wasn't supposed to stink last night, and it did. And I'm not sure why, but let's get into that. We'll push that to the side. We'll get into Monday Night Football because I do think this Justin Fields dynamic is fascinating, and really so is the quarterback situation with the Vikings. But we can get into that with those two teams in a little bit. K-State news is at the forefront, Tommy, and Will Howard transfers out. That was the headline grabber. Ward transfers out. Really all the quarterbacks except for Avery Johnson transfer out, which is probably a tip of the cap as much as anything to Avery Johnson, right? I guess it caught me off guard, but it shouldn't have. What caught me off guard is I just haven't thought of Will Howard as playing another year of college football, right? Like that's the only, and maybe that's on me. It could be, because I don't know that there was a ton of surprise among the K-State faithful. But for me, it was just like I didn't expect to see it because I didn't expect him to play another year of football. I like it a lot for Will Howard because he's going to be the NIL space will work dividends for him here in this spot. I mean, just about every team in the country will have use for Will Howard next year. And I say that just about every team, but really like there will be a ton of teams that feel like they're a quarterback away or that are graduating a quarterback where he makes a lot of sense. And for K-State, it makes a ton of sense too, Tommy, because now you have to turn the page to Avery Johnson. You have to. And so I'm sure the conversations among Chris Kleiman and Colin Klein and all these quarterbacks have been very honest and like, hey guys, including Will Howard, like it's Avery's job next year. Like he's going to be the guy. Avery, don't worry. You're the guy next year. And what else are you supposed to do? Right? Like, is Will Howard going to come back to K-State and be a backup? Of course he's not. So I like, this is why I like the transfer portal. Right? This is what it's intended for. This is why we like NIL. You've got a guy who has put in everything for K-State, who now has a chance, as he's going to lose his job, which is the right decision too, to still go do what he needs to do and play immediately as a grad transfer and do whatever. It's a little shocking as a headline, but in reality, it makes a ton of sense for all sides.
Yeah, it's a tip of the cap to Avery Johnson, and clearly the page is turning in the Wildcat program that Avery Johnson will be the incumbent starter next season for the Wildcats. And of course, not only Will Howard declaring his intent to transfer, but backup Jake Rubley is transferring from the program. Adrian Lara, who's another backup quarterback, is transferring out. That leaves Avery Johnson as the only quarterback on the roster currently. And so, clearly, I mean, different levels of skill and talent from the three guys that are transferring out. But it's pretty clear that it's of course Avery Johnson's job moving forward. And so I think that there absolutely will be a place for Will Howard. I think there's going to be a pretty solid place for Jake Rubley as well. He was a pretty highly touted recruit coming out of high school, ended up coming with to the Wildcats. And I know that there were conversations at various points about whether or not Jake Rubley should be the starter in Manhattan. So I think that there will be a good landing place for him, but there are going to be tons of programs, I would imagine, that would be vying for the services of Will Howard next season as a grad transfer. Not only the talent and the skills that he possesses, but just also the wisdom and the veteran presence that he brings. He's been around college football for a while, and he can bring a sense of, I would say, relative stability to whatever program he goes to. And I would look at a program that, maybe just lost their quarterback, or maybe has a freshman or a sophomore, an underclassman that maybe they're not fully confident in as the starter for Will Howard to come in and play his final season. It's not unlike what happened with Adrian Martinez transferring out of Nebraska, coming to Kansas State for his final season a year ago.
Yeah, look, it's going to be good for Will Howard. You've heard a lot of chatter, and look, it's all just chatter at this point, but like Notre Dame, people have mentioned Nebraska as almost like a switchback, which would be kind of ironic for Will Howard to then now go to Nebraska. But who knows? There will be lots of teams with deep pockets that can make him, I would imagine, one of, if not the most highly coveted transfer guys this offseason, that's what's so interesting about this. Like K-State has this guy who in normal circumstances, you'd be like, all right, we get one more year. But that's not the case.
Right.
And you have to turn it to Avery Johnson. And we'll get to Avery a little bit more in just a second. But for Howard, like, I've seen people are almost like confused on what to think of his legacy at K-State. And to me, it's a very obvious one. He should be one of the all-time favorite Wildcats. Like whatever happens the rest of his career. And I know that he will be rooted for hard almost no matter where he goes next, because I think at the end of the day, all K-State fans appreciate Will Howard, but you have to really remember everything that has happened over his Wildcat career to truly appreciate how meaningful it is that he's been there as long as he has. It didn't look good early, right? It was not great early. And then you had a year where he had to step in for Skylar Thompson, and then it wasn't good either. You're like, oh man, a wasted year. But then he had to step in for Adrian Martinez, and he was fantastic. And then this year there was a brief period where he didn't look good, and everyone was calling for, his job, and then he got it righted again, and he was so like the ups and downs for him to just sort of ride through it and stick with it and be loyal in Manhattan. That think about the era of college football we're in. Like there were plenty of opportunities, and I don't think anybody would have blamed Will Howard for Will Howard to be like, okay, let me go try something else. But he didn't, man. He stuck with it. And I think that deserves the appreciation and respect as much as anything. Is you can start to power rank him, among all-time K-State quarterbacks wherever you want. Probably, I would guess, slightly inside the top 10, maybe. I don't know. I think this year, like big picture, it was probably a disappointing year for him. We talked about a guy who might creep up draft boards and all those things, and he still may be able to do that at some point, but it's going to have to be somewhere else now. But as far as like a legacy in Manhattan, his is great because he's stuck through it through a lot.
Yeah.
And got opportunities and was loyal to this program and everything else. So I'm happy for him. I really am. I'm happy that he's coming back. I'm happy that now in college football, he's got an opportunity to go get paid a little bit of money. He's kind of a tweener guy to the NFL potentially anyway. This is literally why this NIL transfer portal stuff exists. It's good for the players. He's the perfect example.
From a statistical point of view, he owns the top touchdown honors by any quarterback that has played at K-State. Also, he's in the all-time top 5 for career completions and passing yards in his time in Manhattan. So, I know that you have to kind of separate legacy a little bit from just the flat, statistics. There are some other things that play into it. And so I understand where you're saying he might sneak inside the top 10. I think he's maybe even a little bit higher than that, as far as an all-time great. And because of the fact that he's always been there, he's been the consistent, he's been the guy that has stepped in. He's never been, until this season, he was never the guy for the Wildcats, right? And even this season, to an extent, you had Avery Johnson nipping at his heels a little bit. Like he's never fully been 100% the guy for the Wildcats. It was Skylar Thompson. Then it was Adrian Martinez. Now it's Avery Johnson, right? And so, there are all of these other players that, he had to compete for, but he was always there, steady and ready to step in. Didn't mean that he always got it right. Didn't mean that it always worked out well. But keep in mind, he delivered a Big 12 championship to the Wildcats a year ago. He delivered a Sugar Bowl appearance last season for the Wildcats. I mean, there are accolades there. And so I think that, Wildcat fans, I know that they have mixed feelings overall about what Will Howard did during his time in Manhattan. But I think that overall, in my opinion, you have to really tip your cap to what he did and the fact that he was always there to be ready to go when one of these other guys, whether it was Skylar or Adrian or whoever, went down, and he was there ready to step up in that role. To your point about him being a tweener in the NFL, I think that it's going to be incredibly essential if he's got aspirations to play in the NFL. He's got to go to a program next season that will extenuate the stats that he has, the talent that he has. I mean, put him in a position to where he can then climb up the draft boards. And I don't exactly know. I mean, if that's Notre Dame, I mean, I'm sure that Notre Dame, would be if that ends up happening,
there's going to be a lot.
But there's going to be a lot. He's got to pick a program where he's going to be able to get in front of those NFL scouts. And I don't know if he can do enough next season to get into the conversation in being a draftable quarterback. But because we were talking about it at the beginning of this season about being a guy, that could potentially do that after this year. It didn't really happen that way. So if he wants to do that, and I don't know if he does, I'm sure he does, but next season's going to be crucial for him to find a program to where he can really get to that point.
Look, if Will Levis can find his way into the second round, right?
Yeah.
So can Will Howard. And you got to think of a guy that's got a huge frame, which NFL people love, right? He can make the throws and he can run. So he can do all those things. He hasn't always had the most talented wide receiver groups at Kansas State. And that's not a knock, but I'm just like imagining like best case scenario for him. I don't, what's USC's quarterback situation behind Caleb Williams, right? Like where can he go and pile up stats? There's going to be places where he can do that. And the reality is it's not Will Howard's fault that, the defense allowed 4 massive plays to Iowa State and lost that game. And there's been a lot of that too for Will Howard. And no, I don't think he's the best quarterback in K-State history. I just think the tools are there for him to go do something special somewhere. And he did something special last year at K-State, something very special. That that's like gonna live on in the history of the program forever. So it's great for everybody because, again, K-State's got to move on to Avery Johnson. So when we talk about,
Right.
I don't know the long, rich history of K-State, right? I don't. It's something I paid a whole lot of attention to outside of the last decade, outside of Michael Bishop in the last decade, because I didn't live here. But I think if you looked at it, most people are not putting Will Howard over Lynn Dickey, Colin Klein, L. Roberson, or Michael Bishop, right? You've got those guys. I know Chad May is up there. I'm not sure I would put Howard over Skylar Thompson, quite honestly. I really liked Skylar Thompson in his last year. Now, Skylar Thompson's problem is he was always hurt, but his last year, he was incredible.
Yeah.
Just like on a talent level. But
did Skylar Thompson
he'd be right there.
Did Skylar Thompson lead Kansas State to a Big 12 championship?
No, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. But so that you've got him right there. And again, a lot of this is going to be, and we'll ask Tim Fitzgerald this on Thursday. For me, though, and what I've seen, and like Waters was good, but he's ahead of him, and he's right there with Thompson. Maybe he's better because of the Big 12 championship, and I think that deserves, probably yes.
And keep in mind, by the way, you go back a year ago, don't forget that when Adrian Martinez transferred in from Nebraska, the thought at the time was, okay, this is a quarterback that can lead Kansas State to have a ton of success this season. It didn't happen. The first few games were not very good for Adrian Martinez at all. Then he goes down with an injury, and everybody kind of thought, okay, I think the season is probably not going to turn out the way that we wanted it to. I don't want to say that everybody thought it was going to be a lost year when Adrian Martinez went down, but certainly, expectations were not nearly as high as soon as you knew that Will Howard was taking over.
Not when you saw Will Howard
the year before. And all he did was lead him to a Big 12 championship and a game against Alabama in the Sugar Bowl.
I cannot wait to see where he lands, and he will have fans from this part of the world. Like that, everybody's going to root for that team and him. I do think that. Like, I don't think there's a K-State fan alive that doesn't root for wherever unless he ends up at, I don't know, Iowa State, right? Like some whatever. Like he'll be fine. Let's take a quick break. The other piece of this, of course, is Avery Johnson, and then we'll get into some of the other transfers, most notably Treshaun Ward, because basically it's Will Howard and the other quarterbacks out, Adrian Martinez in. We'll talk about that. It actually makes a lot of sense as the time for him to take the reins. We'll get into that. The IHOP hotline is open, 869-1240. It's Albracht and Castor. Jad Chambers producing. We'll be back. More on this early portal talk for K-State next.
This is Sports Daily on KFH.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Tommy, man card just got ripped out of my pocket. So we've got a couple of electrical issues, and the guys here is doing a great job fixing some stuff at the same time. And we've had a fan, like a living room fan out for, 2 years now. I'm like, yeah, we just can't get it to come on. And I was just checking in with him during the break there. And he's like, yeah, I fixed the fan. And I'm like, really? Like, what did you do? He's like, I pulled the cord. Like, there is no way. Like, we have been fighting that fan for like 2 years. I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna throw myself down the stairs right now.
I know you're a big time handyman. I'm surprised.
I'm a big time handyman. I'm just like, there's like, that cannot be right. Like, I'm telling you, we have fidgeted, and we're not the only one. We've had other people that are handier look at it, but whatever. It works. All right. So we talked about the Will Howard piece of this. The Avery Johnson piece is really interesting because he's like the only guy left. And I saw a scenario where there's like an academic transfer guy, and I don't even know what his name is, never heard of him before, that might be able to play, but it's going to probably be like Avery Johnson or the Wildcat offense, I think, if something were to happen. It's really interesting, and we've been wondering about Avery Johnson and like, when does he take over and when does he take over? And that just sort of came to a screeching halt late in the season. But what's interesting about it is when you think about it now, this makes a ton of sense. And it makes me wonder, like, how long do you think this has been in the plans? Like, this whole situation? Because what you've got now is what's going to be a high-profile game. You'll have a month essentially to prepare Avery Johnson for it, to like officially take the reins. So, K-State, I'm sure, has had conversations with the way this all played out yesterday with Will Howard. Like, it makes me wonder if it was like, let's see if we can get into a Big 12 championship game. If we don't, then we're going to turn it over to Avery Johnson. You'll have our full support in the transfer. Like, I wonder how much of this was predetermined and predestined, because it is almost perfect timing to hand the reins to a young quarterback when, for whatever the game is, they'll have a month to prepare for it. And you can very cleanly and officially and without question make the transition. I think probably there has been something to that. And of course, they're not going to tell us that. But it makes sense that there has been some planning on this. And for Avery, I'm excited about this opportunity because it does let you sort of soft land on his debut. His official debut.
I really think that a lot of this has been scripted throughout the season on the way that they planned on doing this. And, remember, we've speculated basically week in and week out about what they're going to do at quarterback, right?
Right.
And, it kind of started primarily with Will Howard. Then they kind of went to that 2 quarterback model for a few games, and it worked really well in a couple, and it didn't really in another one. And then they kind of went back to Will Howard full-time for the final few games. And I think, again, a lot of that is scripted. They wanted to see what they had in Avery Johnson, earlier in the season, experiment with the 2 quarterback system to get them both reps. Then you kind of go back to Will Howard at the end of the season. And I think a lot of that, I mean, maybe not a lot of it, but some of that has to do with Howard being able to break some records at K-State by having the full-time job again, get his draft stock maybe up a little bit more, or at least make him more attractive to other teams that may want him to transfer in. So I think that a lot of that was scripted. And by the way, you also get Avery Johnson reps earlier in the season to get him ready for this bowl game and beyond. Keep in mind, Johnson played enough games to burn that red shirt. They couldn't have redshirted him, right? And so, knowing that, I think that when you look back at it in retrospect, it all kind of makes sense to me. And we questioned a lot about what they were going to do at quarterback. But now knowing Will Howard transferring out, now knowing Avery Johnson is going to be given the reins, especially for the bowl game and beyond, I think the way that they went about it, it makes sense to me now when I look at it from now, now back to the way that the season played out.
Right. I agree. If you look back at it, it makes some sense. And it's interesting as we watch it to see the opportunity now. And we always wondered too, like the psychology of it, right? And like, how is this being handled if you're Avery? Is he handle it? But if this was the plan, then it's an easy sell,
Yeah.
right? Like, at one point in the season, Avery was used when Howard was struggling to sort of save the season. And he did in some ways. And then Howard started playing really well again. And it was like, okay, now back to the original plan, right? Like, it's yours until it's not. And here's when it's not going to be yours. And if you want to transfer and get out ahead of it, if we don't make a Big 12 championship game, why don't you do that like right away? And then we can transition Avery at the bowl game to do it. It makes a ton of sense. And I'm curious to know how predetermined we think it was. And Chris Kleiman talks today. Yeah, today he should. I don't know if that gets thrown off. It normally is a Tuesday. I don't know without a game if that is going, but maybe we'll get some clarity on that. But it does make sense. It's a perfect opportunity for Adrian Martinez.
Avery Johnson.
Avery Johnson. Yeah. It's a perfect opportunity for Avery. And this is it. This is what K-State fans have been waiting for, basically.
Well, and here's the other thing to keep in mind with Avery Johnson, and I'm trying to put myself in his shoes and think about it from his point of view. If this was not a predetermined or at least fairly predetermined strategy from the Wildcats offense as the season went on, it would be very easy for me as Avery Johnson to be a little frustrated with the way the season played out, because you played in enough games to burn your red shirt so you don't get to use that. And then if there was any kind of indication that Will Howard not only was the full-time starter or mainly full-time starter this season, but potentially coming back next season, if I'm Avery Johnson, I'm kind of like, well, do I want to stay at Kansas State or do I want to transfer out? Because I can probably make some NIL money, somewhere else and contribute right away. So I think, again, when you look at this in retrospect, clearly, in my mind at least, this was something that at least had some sort of predetermination on it with buy-in from the quarterbacks. I don't know if it was Will Howard at the beginning of the season, or I don't exactly know how it all played out. Maybe Tim Fitzgerald has more insight in that, but I'm guessing at some point Will Howard said, guys, this is going to be my last year with the Wildcats. I'm going to go somewhere else as a grad transfer. Avery, it's your program after this season. I'm guessing that's maybe the way it went down. I don't know. But if it didn't go down that way, then yeah, I could see Avery Johnson maybe being a little bit frustrated with the fact that he can't use a red shirt, and if there was any indication that Will Howard would come back.
It all makes sense. And it will be good for the program one way or the other. And now, of course, the ball is in Avery Johnson's court to make it good. And then the other piece of it is, what does Avery have to work with next year? He's going to lose a lot. It looked like there was a tremendous opportunity for Treshaun Ward next year, and he's out. Now, I will tell you that I wasn't blown away this year. He was a nice compliment, I think. But it wasn't anything that like rocked our world, right? With Treshaun Ward this year. So I would imagine, as much as that one annoys K-State fans, and I think it does, that there will be a pretty good open market for the starting running back at K-State next year. Don't you think? Like, that's a pretty good, and it was last year when they got Treshaun Ward, basically. Now, he didn't end up being that, but I think that they're going to have plenty there to bring in somebody of significant value. And then can you go get a couple of weapons for Avery to work with? Of course, his running is going to be, much of what he does. And we'll have DJ Giddens back, as far as I know, right?
He's only a sophomore. He redshirted in 2021.
Right.
Played last
year. But I do
think
they need another one. So he's I think they need another one.
But you know what? I think DJ Giddens emerged as the true feature back for the Wildcats next season.
They need a thunder and lightning.
Right. But the thing is that if I'm Treshaun Ward, I came to Manhattan to fill the shoes of Deuce Vaughn. And, I was planning on being the guy running the football for the Wildcats. And DJ Giddens had a really nice season and really never gave up the reins to be the true guy, the true feature back for Chris Kleiman and Colin Klein's offense. And so I get Treshaun Ward transferring out. I think he can go to another program and contribute immediately and be that feature back. So it makes sense to me that Ward is transferring out. But DJ Giddens, you're right. I think they need somebody else behind him, kind of in the same way that he was behind Deuce Vaughn last season. They need to bring somebody else in who can complement him.
I agree. And then they're going to need some receivers. But they got a lot coming back though, right? They've got plenty there. You feel good about it. The line, I suppose, will be an area of emphasis as they're going to lose some linemen. That was the big thing they had going for them. Have we heard on Ben Sinnott what he's doing?
The only thing I know about Ben Sinnott is that he tweeted, out to Will Howard saying he was going to miss him.
Yeah, they were boys.
So I don't know if that, indicates that he's back next season, or what that looks like. It'd
be a big help for Avery.
Now I do,
but he's an NFL guy.
Right, I do
he's
know
an
at one point during the season, and I don't know, I haven't looked recently, but I think it was Mel Kiper from ESPN had Ben Sinnott as one of, if not maybe the top tight end targets in the NFL draft. And so, I don't know how much more you can raise your stock if you're Ben Sinnott by returning.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to look. I don't see a mock right off the top.
So he's only a junior. He's only a junior. He could return.
No, he can come back. Yeah, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just trying to look at another mock, and he was, what was he, third or fourth highest at one point this season. He's going to have an opportunity. He could get drafted. We'll put it that way. Could he get drafted at a higher level? Possibly, if he comes back. So we'll see. There's a lot of questions still to be answered on the K-State offense, but the reality is you have to get to work right now on bringing guys in, and that's why some clarity on this stuff will be crucial. And not just in the transfer. I don't know that, I don't think Ben Sinnott's transferring, right? I don't think that's going to happen. It's more about, will he be back, and do they need to replace him on the roster? Can they count on him being there next year? And those are the kinds of things, can you ask those questions and find out the answers? And, Phillip Brooks is I think gone. He's a senior. I'm still confused by the COVID year stuff. And so I would love for K-State to just say, here's who's coming back, here's who's not coming back, and let's move on with it. I'm so ready for the super senior stuff to stop, because it's so hard to know who still has eligibility left. And we can get clarity later in the week and all that. I think Avery Johnson's got a great and tremendous opportunity. He's pretty much, if all goes as planned, going to have 2 years with, to lead this offense and do his thing. And I can't wait for it. We've all been waiting for it. And at the same time, you're like, Will Howard, what a great career. Thanks for the Big 12 championship. Thanks for sticking with it all that time. And it's an odd day, because at the same time, when everybody was saying Avery right now, I think people backed off of that a little bit over the course of the season. And so here it is, though, K-State fans. Here's the moment you get this, again, the most talented high school player I've ever seen all around takes over for the next few years in a wide open Big 12, quite frankly, next year.
And he was tantalizing in the few games that we saw him play in this season. We kind of got a little appetizer of Avery Johnson before he fully takes over the starting quarterback role. And, we talked about Will Howard. We talked about the role that he played as the quarterback all of those years, where he was never really the guy. Even this season, when he was the starter, you had Johnson nipping at his heels, like I mentioned. Avery Johnson is the guy. So it's completely different from the way Will Howard played at Kansas State, and the role that he had as quarterback, and the role that Avery Johnson is going to have moving forward. The offense is on his shoulders. Colin Klein will build that offense around Avery Johnson. There's not another option. You mentioned Avery Johnson or the running the Wildcat. I mean, that's basically, I guess, what it is. Because as of right now, there are no other quarterbacks on the roster. That will change, obviously, but it's not like they're going to bring anybody in that will be nipping at the heels of Avery Johnson. It is his job moving forward. And
we're not just in the bowl game. I was just talking about the bowl game, but they'll have to bring in some other quarterbacks in the offseason. But there will be no question for the next 2 years who quarterback of K-State is. And we're cooking in some Avery Johnson's going to be tremendously successful into that, but I fully believe
that's a different mindset than what we've been used to with the Wildcats for the last several seasons. And I know that, they handed the reins
some
to
of that
Skylar
is
Thompson.
Injury.
They handed the reins to Adrian Martinez. Injury has derailed that a lot, but it's been a while since and hopefully Avery Johnson, fingers crossed, can stay healthy, but it's been a while since there's been this mindset and mentality of this is the guy for the Wildcat offense, and it's going to be his job.
As we're talking about that, though, it does emphasize like their backup quarterback situation maybe becomes the most impactful thing that they do because of the history of the program and what we've seen. When was the last time K-State made it through a season with a healthy quarterback?
Yeah.
So, they do have to find a backup now. And you're going to have to find somebody that's willing to come in and be a backup, or you're going to have to trust a true freshman, basically. Because we'll ask about, I wish I could remember the name of this academic transfer guy, but you know what I mean? Like there's nobody there, not just in the bowl game, just like period. And the history of this program tells us you're going to need a second quarterback. So we'll see. They got a lot of work to do. I want to know about some of the guys on the rest of this roster and know what they're thinking and what they're doing. And hopefully we get some clarity on that over the next week. It's an interesting time, down the road in Lawrence. We kind of know, right? And with Jalen Daniels basically declaring what he's going to declare, we kind of know what's happening there next year. And it's going to put them as one of the favorites in the Big 12 for sure. There's no question about that. And there are certainly more questions at K-State, which is just an interesting dynamic altogether, right? When was the last time we had that? Big 12 is going to be fun next year. Both of these teams are going to be right there in the mix at the top, and we love that and can't wait to see it. All right, 869-1240. The IOP hotline is open. Chime in, K-State fans. We'll come back. We'll hit some of the other topics, including this Monday Night Football game. No, not just that it stunk, but you've got two really interesting quarterback situations for teams playing out in that game, and neither quarterback currently there gave you just a whole lot of hope in what you saw, but we'll get into that. By the way, can't get enough Chiefs coverage. Check out New Heights with Jason and Travis Kelsey, free on the Odyssey app. Follow it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast. Tommy and I will be back. We'll wrap up hour number 1. Your calls. Oh, programming note. Dan Israel. He's going to join us later in the week. He'll be with us Friday. He's traveling today. So we'll have that regular interview a little bit later in the week than normal. We'll come back. We've got giveaways for you. Lots to come on Sports Daily on a Tuesday. All right, welcome back, everybody. Let's I mentioned that programming note. Just found out right as we went off that Dan Israel is got a flight delay, so he can jump in today. So we will have Dan Israel, top of the hour, Chiefs fans, to talk a little Chiefs football on a regularly timed weekly visit with Dan, the executive producer of the Chiefs Radio Network. So we will have that at the top of the hour. Let's give away some HTO coffee, Jad. We'll do HTO's Brew House, which is all the iced and hot coffee, espresso, all the fancy stuff. All the is it French? Is it French, Tommy, with like latte and macchiato? Like what is there? What ethnicity is that? What ethnicity are those words?
I would imagine some of them are probably Italian. Cappuccino, macchiato.
Is that? Yeah, that'd be Italian, right?
Venti,
well, whatever
grande,
it is.
Like I think that's all.
Yeah. Yeah. All that stuff, we got all that stuff at HTO too, which, I drink black coffee. I grew up in a cowboy family. Give my coffee black. Don't you put anything in there. That's what I drink. But the other stuff is really good. I do occasionally get some of the espresso stuff, and it's really good. So we'll give away a couple of those, some free Brewhouse offerings. Those are available at the HTO in Wichita on the east side and in Derby. So you can get your hands on those cards. Check it out. See what I'm talking about. It is really, really good. You'll get that right now on the IHOP hotline at 869-1240. Jad will get us a winner for our first caller. All right, Tommy, real quick, let's talk Monday Night Football. So you've got two quarterback situations here. The Bears have to figure out what they're doing with Justin Fields, first and foremost, because they're probably going to have the top pick overall, and then they're going to have another top 5-ish pick. You have got to let him throw the ball down the field. Like, if you're trying to evaluate Justin Fields and what he's going to be, let him throw the ball down the field. Like, everything was underneath and laterals and screens and all this stuff last night. And I'm like, even if he fails, what do you have to lose? Let him push the ball down the field and see if he's got it. They have a really critical decision to make. And maybe it's easy for them. Maybe it's like, no, we're going Caleb Williams or Drake May or whatever we're doing, and Fields is going to have to go somewhere else. Okay, well, you still want him to be a valuable trade asset, right? At that point, what are we doing here with him in the screen game?
Yeah, I actually think that the Bears are in kind of a good position. I mean, moving forward. I mean, as of now,
they should be.
Well, I think that they actually are. And I'm going to say that they are for the future because, they can move away from Justin Fields if they decide to. They can make him a trade asset. And I think that there are some quarterback needy teams that, look at him and they can see the potential to develop him and all of that. So I do think that regardless if he's going to throw screens with the Bears or not, I think there are other teams out there that can see his value. But then they've got all of this trade capital or all the draft capital that they have from the Panthers that they got when they traded the number 1 pick a year ago. I think that they're in a decently good position regardless of what ends up happening. And you know what? There were, early in the game, the Bears put together a drive to start off the game that didn't end up in really doing anything. I think Cairo Santos missed the field goal. But the Bears were cooking. Justin Fields was looking pretty good on that opening drive of the game. And then things kind of went south from there. They never got into the end zone. But I do think that if they decide to move on from Justin Fields and draft Caleb Williams or Drake May or whatever that ends up being for them, I think that there are going to be a handful of NFL teams that will look at Justin Fields and say, yes, we think that he can be a guy that can still be a viable NFL starter.
I don't know if he can be, but I think you'd want, whether they're going to use him or somebody else, you do want to show people that he can throw the ball down the field. And I think that he can.
I think he can. I just don't think he's given opportunities, to in this offense.
That's what I'm saying. Why? Yeah. Why, though? You have DJ Moore now. Darnell Mooney's pretty good. Let the guy throw the ball down the field. And they just didn't do that. And so I don't know what they're going to do.
DJ Moore had 114 receiving yards last night.
Right? And 78 of those came on Yak, right? It wasn't, he had the one big catch down the field on that final drive. And it's where has that been?
Yeah.
Because we've seen it this year with those two guys. So they don't do whatever. And I don't know what the answer for them is, but absolutely, if I'm a team desperate at quarterback, I take a swing at Justin Fields and see what he's got. The problem is it's going to come with a contract here pretty soon, and I don't know what that means because he's going to run out on his rookie deal here pretty quick. The other situation with Josh Dobbs, great story, but he's not the long-term answer in Minnesota, I don't think. He wasn't good at all last night, and he's been pretty good there, and I like Josh Dobbs. What do they do? What does Minnesota do? Is Minnesota a team that a guy like Justin Fields makes a lot of sense for? Because they've got this Kirk Cousins situation where he's got like dead cap money. And if I had to bet money, I would bet that Cousins is back there and they figure out a way to offset the cap hit next year with him with a longer term deal. But I don't think it's a foregone conclusion. And I just don't know what they're supposed to do because they're going to have Hawkinson and Addison and Justin Jefferson back. They've got a lot. And now with Brian Flores there, if they can keep him another year, like they're kind of close, which is why I think Kirk Cousins still makes some sense. But I don't know what they're supposed to do at quarterback either. And that was really interesting as Dobbs really struggled last night.
I think at the end of this season, they have to take a long, hard look in the mirror and think, is there a better option to start at quarterback than Kirk Cousins? And I don't really know that there is.
I don't think there will be.
I don't really
Kirk
think that
Cousins
there is.
was really good this year before he got hurt.
Yeah, I mean, look, like you could conceivably trade for Justin Fields. You could grab somebody else, that's young and try to develop them. I just don't think that's I don't think that that's going to be the right thing for them moving forward. Now, the question is, do they feel like everybody else around the quarterback is in a position to win a Super Bowl? Is the defense good enough to win a Super Bowl? Is the offensive line good enough? Or are we getting close to a complete tear down to the studs and rebuild for Minnesota?
It's a damn shame because as the defense is really starting to play well, Cousins got hurt because with Addison and Jefferson and Hawkinson and a line that's playing, if that line could play just a tick better for Kirk Cousins, he's as good as there is in a clean pocket.
They don't have a great running game, right? Alexander Madison hasn't really done much, but you can figure that out.
You can solve that quickly.
I felt really bad for Josh Dobbs last night because it's been such a great story. Him coming to Minnesota, not knowing anybody, not knowing the plays, not knowing anything, and playing really well. He didn't play well last night.
He's gotten worse as he's learned more.
It wasn't
right. But he could maybe still stick around there and be a backup. All right, we'll come back. We may get into that in the second hour. We'll see. But up next, Chiefs talk. Dan Israel, and we'll get into this loaded, crowded, weird AFC top of the rankings. See what he thinks. I'm sure optimistic about what we saw last week from the Chiefs and moving forward, their schedule's easy. We'll talk about it all. Dan Israel coming up next on Sports Daily.
Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
Caught! Touchdown! Kansas City!
Hey, Chiefs Kingdom, we have you covered. Joining Sports Daily Live, executive producer of the Chiefs Radio Network, Dan Israel.
All right, welcome back in, everybody. Hour number 2, Sports Daily. Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor, and Dan Israel, who's just loving life at the airport right now. Dan gets to enjoy. You know, it's just such a joy to get stuck in an airport, isn't it, Dan?
Well, let's just say the airline to remain nameless. Let's just call them Squelta, for lack of a better term, maybe. A 6-hour delay. Yeah, I don't mind a 15-minute delay, but a 6-hour delay is a bit excessive.
That's quite a delay. That is that's something. And you know what? With the airline, we just got to kind of grin and bear it too. There aren't a lot of industries where they just rake you over the coals constantly, charge you an arm and a leg to use their services, never deliver on time or do what they're supposed to do, and you just get there and you just get to smile and say, "Okay, thanks for having me." But you know what? We'll pass the time with you here, Dan. Let's talk a little Chiefs here. You know, I gotta say, I've been in the camp and as loud as I can be with don't worry, everything's fine. The AFC's not that good. The Chiefs are still the best. And then they got down 14-0. And I'm like, all right, you know what? Like, I don't know how much more of this I'm going to be able to withstand before I jump on the other side of that line. But everything was fine, and they got it done. But there was a moment there, right? There was a moment there that even the people that have been like, don't panic, were like, okay, I'm kind of panicking here. How are you? Like, what's happening right now?
Yeah, that first quarter felt like it was 2 days long. I mean, you just don't expect the Chiefs, especially as good as the defense has been playing, you don't expect them to go down 2 touchdowns. That's excessive. And, you know, there are teams that don't have the ability to make their way back from that kind of deficit. But fortunately for the Chiefs, even with the slow start, they just slowly and methodically kept playing their game. The defense locked it down. I mean, they gave up 14 points, but they only gave up in the first quarter, but they only gave up 3 points the remainder of the game. So I do feel like the Chiefs kind of rallied and were able to find their way out of that hole, because it was You can't dig a hole like that on the road. Not and win. Not usually in the National Football League. I thought it was interesting. One of the Raiders players after the game gave an interview, and he said, he was really frustrated because he just felt like, they have more. He called them dogs on their team. And he says, I know we're a better team than the Chiefs. It's like, really? Really? I mean, you won 6 games last year. Chiefs were the Super Bowl champions. I don't know quite where your perspective got off there, but it sure looked like it in the first quarter. Fortunately, the last 3 quarters were better.
It felt like to me, Dan, that we were watching kind of vintage Kansas City Chiefs, right? Like the games where they've fallen behind by double digits and then the switch gets flipped and all of a sudden things start clicking and then it's an onslaught offensively, kind of what we've seen from Mahomes and kind of come to expect from him over the years, where he's got an over 500 record when he is trailing by double digits or more, which is unheard of. We haven't really seen that happen, though, throughout the course of this season, where that switch has been flipped and everybody's been waiting on it and waiting on it and waiting on it. And then finally in the game against the Raiders, it did. Did you kind of get that same observation that it was sort of vintage Chiefs?
Yeah, I thought so. I think one of the things that's kind of plagued us early in this season is it's certainly red zone turnovers, just absolute game breakers. And then you've got just the lack of the wide receivers outside of Travis Kelce. Like, it's funny how we refer to Travis Kelce as a wide receiver continually, but outside of that, nobody's really stepped up to the plate. And I felt like, this was kind of a reversion back to where Mahomes was protecting the football and he was spreading the ball around and he was getting things done without the production of Travis Kelce. Now, Kelce still had a good day, just under 100 yards, but it was really, really nice to see Rashee Rice get 100 yards and have a second receiver with production. So I did think it was that way. I don't like the slow starts, but that has been their MO, right? And they've been able to make their way through the playoffs, even with that kind of mentality. And so it was very much a vintage Chiefs game in my mind.
Well, and too, Dan, you mentioned Rice, and it wasn't just that he had 100 yards for me. It was that he had 10 targets. Like, they clearly were targeting him in the game. That's, I don't think, by accident. Do you think this is the point where we see them, maybe game plan or lean into one of these receivers? It was Justin Watson the week before, and that just didn't seem right, at least to me. Now, though, you get a situation with this guy, and that's what it's felt like needed to happen for a little while.
Yeah, it is. And I do think they game planned for him. I think that will change from week to week simply because Coach Reid likes to vary that. And I think Coach Reid likes to highlight the player that he feels is going to be the best matchup in a given contest. That's not always going to be Rashee Rice. However, I do feel like, for this rookie who we've been kind of waiting to emerge, it was signs that, hey, there is something there. Now, will they keep him on a rookie pace? You don't want to crush a rookie. You can overload a rookie very easy. And I feel like they've been cognizant and almost hesitant to put too much on his plate because they don't want to crush him. They don't want to overwhelm him. But I felt like he really handled the pressure well in Las Vegas. And if the Chiefs sense that as well, which I'm sure they do, I can't see why they're not going to feature him going forward, right? Kadarius Toney practices all week, and then is out for the game. And I feel like if you're not going to be able to count on Toney, you're not going to be able to count on Hardman. They've got to feature him. They need him. And so it was. I thought it was very encouraging to see him to not only handle the pressure but really excel in it. Because a couple of those, that last run, that last touchdown that he had, that is a play that Mecole Hardman would have run. That would have been Mecole Hardman's play. I think Mecole would have taken that out of bounds. He cut it back inside and got the touchdown with it. And I thought it was really refreshing to see.
Yeah, I kind of had that same thought that you did when I was watching the game. And as much as I think everybody has been kind of tantalized by the potential that Kadarius Toney brings and just kind of the athleticism that he has, and then knowing that Mecole Hardman has been in the system for a long time, when we're watching games where you've got 8 or 9 different receivers that are being targeted, you don't have anybody then catching the ball, right? Like you don't have anybody that you can really lean on because you're spreading the ball out and the share of the catches out to a number of different people. But it almost seemed to me that the Chiefs were forced to lean on Rashee Rice in the game on Sunday, maybe because they didn't have Tony and Hardman. And I wonder, is that something that moving forward, when you don't have those guys to do those gadget plays, that you kind of have to get them out of the playbook and go back to a more conventional type offense with Rashee Rice?
I think so. I mean, I don't want to limit Coach Reid's creativity with this because certainly he's a genius and, there's things that he can do, but I think you almost have to. I mean, Sky Moore hasn't done it. Tony hasn't done it. Hardman's not there. I mean, what else do you have? And again, you can't really ask Rice to do everything. I mean, at some point you've got to give him things that he can chew and swallow. And so to me, that's more the conventional packages, the more, you even saw some short routes to him, which I thought was surprising. But boy, when he catches it in space, does he explode out? I mean, I feel like speed-wise, he resembles Tyreek. I'm not saying he's as fast as Tyreek, but he resembles Tyreek, that he can drop that second gear and really get going. And so I think they did have to kind of, rely on that type of game. But, the long and short of it is when you get the opportunity, you get those targets, you got to make the most of them. And that's what he did.
Any concern with the early part? The defense bounced back nice before we look ahead and look at the AFC. That solve everything for you? It didn't make sense that the Raiders got to 14, but then everything kind of got better real quick, and they basically just settled in, right? Like everything after that point seemed to get better and was okay. Well, they give up 3 more points the rest of the game. Yeah, 3 more points. Fine moving forward, or any bigger picture concerns with the Raiders getting those early touchdowns?
I think fine moving forward for 2 reasons. One, I really believe in, and I love the fact that Spagnuolo and the defense, they adjust faster. All those years under Marty Schottenheimer, even some of the years under Coach Reid, we've always said, you've got to adjust faster. You got, when a team is doing something, you take advantage of this. Your ability to adjust just in a time frame that allows you to manipulate the situation is important. And I feel like the Chiefs defense is really good at adjusting quickly. I always feel like they play better in the second half anyway than the first half. I feel like they're watching kind of that first half and then they make the adjustments and they just, they get so stingy in the second half. But I felt like they did a good job of adjusting quickly after the second touchdown. And I really think that's important. The second aspect of that is Nick Bolton's not in yet. When do we get Nick Bolton back? I feel like that's going to be an advantage as well. So I don't think I have too many concerns about the defense, even though that was a kind of an anomaly. I feel like that's a solid deal. If the Chiefs offense can kind of continue their ways, and I feel like we're back on the path of where we need to be. And I really love, guys, I love the fact that the Chiefs just refused to lose 2 games in a row. That's important. You can get on that skid and that slope can slide out right under you. And their ability to say, we are not losing a second game in a row, I think is important.
Dan, any updates on Jerick McKinnon moving forward? I thought that Clyde Edwards-Helaire had a pretty nice game on Sunday against the Raiders. And of course, we know about Isaiah Pacheco and the way that he has blossomed into that lead back role. But of course, the versatility that Jerick McKinnon brings, do we know anything about him injury related moving forward?
I haven't heard anything yet. I'm sure we'll hear some news tomorrow as practice kind of goes. I think McKinnon's still, and I say McKinnon's still the third down back. He's still going to be in the mix. He's still going to be the guy once he gets healthy. Obviously, Clyde Edwards-Helaire lost his job because of that. But I think when you consider that Clyde Edwards came in for McKinnon, I don't think there's as big a disparity as when Isaiah Pacheco came in for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So I feel like those two, it's just hard to. It's hard to watch Isaiah Pacheco and not go, man, is that kid fun to watch run, right? And so I don't feel like McKinnon's absence is as big a deal as, possibly just the injury. Once he's back healthy, I think he'll be back in the mix.
Yeah, I think so. I think, and also too, they seem to unlock him a little bit this time of year. But I don't know if the injury derails that. What about Green Bay, Dan? Certainly, they're not going to sneak up on the Chiefs now after what they did to Detroit on Thanksgiving. You got to go to Lambeau. It's Mahomes' first game at Lambeau Stadium. I think Vegas is telling us not to overlook this game as it's only a 6.5-point line. But, Green Bay's got a lot of talented young players. But, just at a bird's eye view early on in the week, what do we think about the Packers?
I just always like Spagnuolo's disguising and his defensive play calling against a young quarterback. I think it's confusing. I think he always fares well. However, having said that, that kid's playing pretty good. And so I think that would be a real key matchup to watch is, does Jordan Love, can he handle the pressure? Can he handle the disguising? Will he learn quick enough throughout the game? Because this is his first game against the Chiefs. Actually, it might not be his first game against the Chiefs, but
second game.
So, but it's definitely something he's going to have to contend with as he goes here. Now, having said that, I do think Mahomes is, how motivated he gets. Staying in Lambeau Field is going to motivate him. And I think it's going to be a big deal. I think that will override the crowd of Lambeau Field. I don't think that'll be an issue for the Chiefs. I expect the Chiefs to do well here. I also think when you look back at the Thanksgiving Day game, I felt like Detroit just had some miserable play calling there. There were some moments in there where you're shooting yourself in the foot. That's not Green Bay beating you. That's you beating you. And so I think it's important for the Chiefs not to do that same thing, because I do think they're a good enough team. They'll capitalize on that if you let them.
Dan, what do you make of the AFC race right now? The Raiders are not the Raiders, the Ravens. They got that lead, the half game lead in the conference, and it's all kind of jumbled up right now. The Chiefs are right in the mix of things. Where do you land on where things kind of fall after 12 weeks in the season?
Yeah, I sure don't like it. It feels so crowded now to where we were a couple of weeks ago. But I also feel like the Ravens aren't as consistent as maybe a team that once they get that first, once they get in the driver's seat, they stay in the driver's seat. I don't think the Ravens can necessarily do that. I think the Chiefs have the ability here, if they can play their caliber of football, let's say, I think they've got a chance to make their way back to the driver's seat, make their way back to that first seed. And frankly, the Ravens' schedule for the rest of the year is way harder than the Chiefs' schedule is. I think the Chiefs have an easier schedule the back half of the year. The Ravens have got some big teams to play here, and I just feel like it's going to be a lot harder for them to stay on the top of the mountain than it was to get there. But we'll see. This is why you don't want to let that happen. You want to stay in control. Chiefs weren't able to do that. Now let's see if they can get back there.
All right, Dan. Safe travels today. I know you guys will have a lot of fun with the broadcast at Lambeau Stadium. Hopefully it's not too cold for you, although some people like it when it's that way in Green Bay. But safe travels today. We appreciate you hopping on. Sorry about the delay. I don't really have any good advice for you for a 6-hour airport delay. All right. Dan Israel, executive producer of the Chiefs Radio Network. Always appreciate his visits. You can, of course, hear the Chiefs Radio Network right here on our Odyssey family of networks. Always great stuff. Loving it. It's always good. KNSS is where you can find the Chiefs broadcast. Very, very good. We appreciate Dan. And yeah, getting delayed in an airport, Tommy, just brutal.
Never fun. It's even worse. At least his delay is happening during the day. And he doesn't have to sleep at the airport. Like, that's always the worst.
That's the worst. And, at some point, like, some people might tell you, well, you pass a delay by, you just go get hammered, right? Like, some people just pass their time at an airport that way. And it's not a bad way to pass the time at an airport. I like just to go belly up somewhere and be like, all right, we're all in this together. Let's just enjoy it, grin and bear it, whatever. We've got this is not a delay. I think we have like a 5-hour layover. We're leaving town late this week. You'll have Paul Savage in Friday, but we've got like a 5-hour layover that we know about currently, and it's like, oh boy, you can't pass that as you did as like a single guy. Like, you don't pass the time when you're traveling with your wife and 3 kids as you did when you were a single guy at the airport. That's for sure. Or maybe you do. I don't, but I guess you could.
You could. You know what? It doesn't make sense to me that you can go and get hammered in an airport and there's, booze flowing freely
Yep.
at all these airport bars. But then if you are too intoxicated, you can't get on the plane and you can't fly to your destination.
Right.
That has never
Exactly.
made sense to me at all.
Well, I mean, you do have to look out for the other passengers, I suppose. And nobody likes
Well, no, I'm not
nobody
saying that
likes
they should
being
let-
on the
I'm-
plane next to
I'm
the
not
drunk
saying
guy.
they should let you on the plane if you're wasted. I'm saying, why make it so freely available in the airport if you can't?
Because you've
you know
just
what I
delayed
mean?
somebody
I
5
get it,
hours.
but
Yeah, I mean, what
you're-
else are you supposed to do?
You're leaning on a lot of trust on the individual to make sure that they know what their limit is before they get on a plane and end up getting sick or end up being obnoxious or whatever. I just think that's a dangerous game to play.
It is, but you've got to also allow people to pass these massive delays. I don't know what you're supposed to do either, other than trust people to be responsible. But you've put people in a situation that they're angry or frustrated.
Right.
You haven't put them in a good position to succeed right out of the gates there. But good luck to Dan. Anybody traveling in the holiday season when you get these delays. I guess technology has made it slightly easier. Most of us can find a way to pop a movie on whatever device we're carrying with us. We're traveling on Thursday afternoon, evening. Here's going to be the real problem with that. So the Cowboys are playing. I'm like, oh, great. I'll just watch the game at the airport. But they're on Prime.
Mhm.
It's not going to be, I doubt very seriously that the airport bars have Amazon Prime.
Watch it on your
so
phone. Pull it up on your phone.
I suppose. Yeah. And we piggyback an account. I hope Amazon's not listening to me right now. What am I kidding? Amazon's always listening. We piggyback an account. So hopefully it works. We'll figure it out. We'll figure out a way to do it. But again, 3 young kids, they'll be all right with that, layover for about 20 minutes before they lose their minds. And so it'll be good. It'll be nice and fun. I wonder which airport we're getting laid over in. I have to look at that. If it's the Denver airport, Denver airport's a great airport to get laid over in. They got good craft beer there at the airport. It's a great airport. Have you ever been laid over in the St. Louis airport? That has to be the worst airport in the country.
Yeah, it's not good.
It's awful. There's nothing there, number one. And there is no room. Every time I'm ever in that airport, I'm like, why do they let this many? You can't. Here's the rule, airports, if you're listening. You cannot have more travelers than chairs in your airport. You cannot force people to sit on the ground. This is a society.
But isn't
what are we doing here?
Isn't the St. Louis airport kind of a microcosm of the city itself?
I've never spent time in St. Louis, so I can't really pile on. We're in Denver. We're laid over in Denver.
Okay, good.
We'll be fine. Denver airport's fantastic. It's a great airport. Love it. You got to, we fly Southwest. I think you have to get out of the Southwest wing. But when you go to the other wings, like the bougie wings, they've got some really cool stuff. So we'll be all right. Don't listen. Nobody worry about us at home. We'll be just fine. All right. Let's come back. We'll get into some of the other topics around the sports world today. We've been pretty football heavy here. But we'll look into it. There's been some baseball movement. We got all kinds of good stuff out there. We'll do it next on Sports Daily. All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily here on KFH. Jake Albracht, Castor with You Can't Get Enough Chiefs coverage. Check out New Heights with Jason and Travis Kelsey, free on the Odyssey app. Follow it on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast. Glad to be here with you. By the way, congratulations to Tim for winning our HDO Brewhouse coffee giveaway there in the first hour. Oliver asks us real quick on the video stream. You can always catch our video stream, by the way. We know we have a lot of great listeners. You can watch us too. Facebook, YouTube, Twitch. Easy way to watch us if you're trying to sneak us in at work, I will say. Ask if Avery plays in the bowl game for K-State. Will he get the red shirt this year? I think, Tommy, he's already lost the red shirt.
Yeah, he's already burned through that.
So you, in theory, and it comes down to that Texas game, when I think he threw a pass or something, and came in and ran the ball once and threw a pass. That basically cost him when you look back at it. You would in theory get a hall pass in a bowl game. I believe they changed that rule, but I don't think it matters for Avery because I think he already burned through it. But I will say this too, Oliver, it doesn't really matter. You know, like if Avery is as good as we all hope he is, he's not a 4-year guy anyway. And so this is probably all irrelevant, right? And those conversations have been had, and they were good enough this year that you don't really worry about that stuff. I think that gets overrated sometimes. The experience that Avery Johnson gained by playing this year will benefit him greatly moving forward. I would say it's absolutely worth it, and you just don't worry about that stuff with players of that caliber, Tommy.
And again, I think that it's something that was probably predetermined, right? Like I think that there were
Yeah.
conversations moving forward about, okay,
Oh,
Avery,
sure,
what
yeah.
games are you going to be playing in? We're going to probably have you run through the red shirt. And then I'm guessing that Avery and his family and everybody that, on his side, probably they also are thinking, hey, you're not going to be a 4-year guy anyway. So it's probably not the end of the world to go ahead and burn through that.
Look, I think that Kansas State has been saying that, by the way, from the beginning. I know Wyatt Thompson brought it up with us. Like, do we really think this is going to be a 4-year guy? And I can't remember. We had conversations with both Colin Klein and Chris Kleiman over the offseason. And I don't know that they said it directly. I'm trying to recall now. They at least said, and we're, very optimistic about the upside and potential that he has right now, and what it looks like is just like as high as it could possibly be. But the theme around that has always been, we're not that worried about that with this player. And so you can get a red shirt for 1,000 different reasons. It's just not that big a deal with him. Because again, the hope is he's so good that he's only a 3-year player anyway. Like that's the ultimate goal with Avery Johnson to begin with. So they needed him this year in spots they used him. I got no issue with it. I don't really care. Like, cross that bridge when you get there. With the history they have of developing quarterbacks, I just don't think it's going to be that big a deal. All right, Tommy, let's talk. Here's something that's come up that we just, because we haven't had a chance to discuss this little development in this stadium situation for the Royals. A couple of things have come out. Now, you've seen something, and I haven't seen this, about a price tag issue on one of them. But the one that has my interest is that, again, you've got some rumblings of maybe an outside threat, whatever. We could go over to the Kansas side of things. What is the latest that you've seen on all this?
Yeah, so the latest story came out yesterday. It was the Fox affiliate in Kansas City. They obtained a document that showed a corrected number for how much a new stadium would cost for the Royals in Jackson County. So originally, the document that was leaked to the media back in October said that a new stadium could cost Jackson County as much as $6.4 billion. The corrected number is $5.1 billion on the high end. So it's a 1.2.
That's too high.
It's a $1.2 billion accounting or calculation error between the documents. And the county administrator for Jackson County in an interview said that it was just a formula error. However, there's a politician, Democratic Jackson County legislator Manny Abarca. He is thinking that this was a political move to scare voters before voting happened, to try to scare them by thinking that the number was going to be too high and to scare them away from voting for it. So there is some controversy with that number, but it's an over $1 billion accounting error in the document, showing how much this new stadium could cost Jackson County over a stretch of like 40 years.
That number is too high. It is. Like, one way or the other, that number is too high.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's $5 billion or $6 billion.
Right. Stadiums shouldn't cost baseball stadiums especially shouldn't be costing $5 billion. Now, that's probably like an entire project, I assume, number, and not just the stadium. But that investment will not pay off. Like, that's too high. It does not cost that much. It costs that much to build a SoFi in Southern California.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you're talking about the world-class football stadium, a baseball stadium, which is open air, right? They're not putting a dome on this thing. Like, it's going to be an open-air baseball stadium in Missouri. Like, that price tag is too high. So I don't care what the calculation is. That's ridiculous.
There are some really interesting quotes in this article, and I'll read them for you. This is from Manny Abarca, who's the legislator in Jackson County. He says, and I quote, "I think these numbers were inflated to scare voters. I think that's part of, again, why the stadium committee needs to exist, to create the realities of what is fact and what is fiction. There's one thing to say we're going to voters. It's another thing to say that we're trying to persuade voters against or for, and the facts should dictate that, not anything else. So these facts matter, and that's why I called out the $1 billion error."
Well, look, Manny. I don't even remember what political affiliation you said he was. I don't really care. The reality is there is data in history all over the place that says these things don't pay off the way that they're pitched.
Right.
They just don't. So, number one, let's push that to the side and understand that when you have these discussions, you have to understand if they're not going to financially make sense at all. Never do, never will, unless it's privately funded by whoever it is that's benefiting from it and building it. Never will, because it just doesn't, right? Like, it doesn't generate what people say it generates. It's, you get these committees together and they're like, oh, it's going to generate $12 billion. You're like, okay, show me how. Like, how does that happen?
And
like, you can say that. It's great.
Show me how the economic development will be directly tied to the new stadium, or will it be a byproduct of the new stadium? I mean, and I think that you can try to, spin it however you want. The other thing that's interesting in this article is that Abarca was quoted as saying that it was certainly an option when he was asked if it sounded like the Chiefs could move to Kansas. So that was a part of the article as well.
So a couple of things on that. Like, I'm not saying you never do these things. I'm just saying, like, stop lying to us about the economic benefits of a stadium. Number one, you're already getting the economic benefits of a stadium. So you basically, when you're making your calculations of all the money, like, okay, well, subtract everything you're making now, right? And what's the difference between what you'd get and what you're getting now? And it's just not that high, right? Now, I will say on the flip side of that, because I generally support these things. It's all about, like, what is our city, right? And if you're Kansas City, Missouri, it's important for your city to have a professional baseball team. It's important for your city more so to have the Kansas City Chiefs. It's an attraction thing. It makes your city more attractive to people to come there. It just does. And so you have to, like, balance that out. The problem when you ask for taxpayer dollars, I always, like, caution, asterisk, whatever. This is not a political conversation. It's not. It's just like an observation conversation. You have to remember, like, the people that are going to foot the tax bill they're not the only people that get the benefit. So if a certain county, right, foots the tax bill for this, I'm jumping for joy if I live in another county, because I'm essentially going to get the same benefit without having to pay anything for it. Right. So it's like right now and again, not a political conversation, asterisk, disclaimer, like, please don't, do whatever you want. I don't care. Where they're building a big new battery factory up there, right? Big thing for Kansas, right? You've heard about this. Massive battery factory. Everything's great. Major driver. Well, come to find out, guess who's footing the bill for the energy cost of that battery factory? We all are.
We all are. The state of Kansas.
You think we in Wichita are going to see the benefits of a battery factory in Kansas City, Kansas? Of course we're not. But guess who gets to foot the bill? Now all of a sudden it's like, well, what the hell? Like, I don't want to pay for that battery factory.
And it's the same thing. And I guess I maybe will make it a little bit of a political conversation. It's the same thing with the open enrollment that's happening around the state now. I live in Butler County. I'm paying Butler County taxes for the Andover school district, but now anybody can, send their kid to that district and not have to pay the taxes to be a benefit of that. It's the same kind of thing, right? And it sort of kind of turns into this conversation where if I'm a resident of Jackson County, if I'm a resident of Clay County, that's the other county that is in discussions about bringing a new stadium for the Royals, I don't want to have to pay the added taxes for it. I want to live in the adjacent county where I can go and 100%. Enjoy it, and I don't have to pay the taxes for it.
So the battery factory, it's going to bring jobs and drive the economy right there where people are going to live.
Right.
So if I'm there, I'm like, heck yeah, let's get this thing in, and then everybody else gets to pay for it. Like, your Evergy rates are going way up, everybody, because and they just got a smaller portion approved, and they get to do it again. Like, you're going to pay a whole lot more for your energy bills. It probably bites a little bit less at home. It's going to bite real bad as a business owner. It's like, God, whatever. So you have to look at these stadium things and understand it in totality, right? The county that has to, and this is why this stuff should all be privately funded. most of the time. The battery factory coming to Kansas is like, okay, well, this becomes a major employer, one of the biggest in the state. I get it. I understand it. I understand.
Like you can swallow that. Like I can be like, okay, I don't love
I don't love it,
but
I don't love it. It makes me very angry,
right?
But I get it. And so, like, if you're the Royals/Chiefs, and this politician brings this up, well, look, there's a real chance they go to Kansas. So you've got an interesting situation developing. If they came to, like, this is where the pressure comes on for the state of Kansas. You know what? Attracting over the Chiefs more importantly than the Royals, but for all intents and purposes, we'll just package them together. That's where you drive the tax incentives. I mean, that becomes, I've said this before, the Chiefs would instantly become the state of Kansas's greatest export if they were to come over. That's just the way it is. And so, how much benefit do we all get from it? Or that part is debatable. And that's the stranglehold these professional franchises have on everybody right now. But I understand it. But don't pitch it as this money-making, driving. I mean, we went through this with a downtown stadium in Wichita. They still can't figure out that thing and how to make it work. And they're going to go back to the well. I still think it was the right thing to do. And I still think hopefully that development gets done because it's a higher profile for the city of Wichita. Having that big, beautiful stadium down there, they're going to learn how to use it the right way. Whether it becomes like a sellout for a baseball game every once in a while, it becomes a crown jewel of your city. I get it. And for the most part, I support it. I wish there was more honesty in what it cost and what it will generate and how it will generate it. But
I'm a little bit more cynical, I think, than you are about the future. I mean, I love Riverfront Stadium. I love going down there and watching a game. It's beautiful. But I've lived in this metro area my entire life. They've been trying to develop the West Bank forever. I mean, forever.
Yeah.
And it's never happened. And so, it very well could happen eventually now that you have a brand new baseball stadium downtown. I'm not holding my breath because I've, been through all these different, scenarios where we're going to develop a water walk and it's going to look like San Antonio and we're going to do all, and it's never happened. Right. And so you've got the opportunity now with the new stadium in Wichita. I'm just not holding my breath that it's ever going to happen.
Well, and if it does happen, how much money does it generate?
Right.
Again, like if it happens, it's good for your city because it makes your city more attractive.
And you have to have a balance. And that's where Kansas City, like you've got to figure out what the balance is between keeping these professional franchises in your market, because there will be another city that will throw everything at them to bring them in versus putting the burden on the shoulders of the taxpayers. You have to balance that in some way.
Well,
I just don't think they're doing a good job at that right now.
If you're a resident of that county, Tommy, and it's your money, do you really care if you got to drive across the border to go to a game?
Nope. Vote it down.
Bye.
Yeah.
Like, see ya. Like, cause it doesn't, the pressure is on the decision makers, but like you don't get the tax revenue, but it's going to cost so much.
By the way, you know what the easiest solution is? John Sherman, pay for it yourself.
Always.
Pay for it yourself.
And we're seeing that. We saw it with the Rams Chargers stadium. We're seeing it with the new Denver stadium. Those owners are paying for their own stadiums. They will get a financial advantage. Like they're always the winners in this thing because they get free, they drive down the cost through public money and they still generate the same. If you want, I've always said this, if you want public money, whatever the percentage the public money pays for, every penny of your revenue, we get that percentage back. So if we give you, think about the bank here, Tommy. If you go to the bank and you say, lend us this money, there's a percentage on that you got to pay back. If you take private investors, you got to give up ownership of your company. So if like the Chiefs or the Royals, like if John Sherman, if Jackson County or whatever county it is wants to say, okay, great, we get 20%, we pay for 20%, we get 20% of your revenue. Or if we're going to be the bank for you, we want to guarantee 10% back because that's where the rates are right now. We'll lend you the money. You owe us back plus 10%. That's how you should do it. But everybody gets so scared. Like, oh, no, we can't lose the Royals. Really? Can't you? Like, is it that big a deal? Everybody's going to drive 20 minutes over the border. I don't think anybody cares. And the state of Kansas wants them and would get them and would love to have them. You've got two very different dynamics working against each other. It'll be fascinating, but stop lying to us. $5.2 billion for a baseball stadium? Get out of here. That will never generate that much money. God. 869-1240 is the number to call. We'll be back. More Sports Daily after this.
All right, welcome back, everybody. It's Sports Daily here on KFH. Tommy Castor, Jacob Albracht, Jad Chambers producing the program today. The IHOP hotline open for a couple more minutes at 869-1240. And Jad and I were just talking about it during the break. A lot of controversy last week, Jad, about the new license plate that was announced for the state of Kansas and just how much everybody seemed to hate that design. Governor Kelly comes out today with the announcement that license plate is going away. They're not going to produce it, which I think is the right thing to do, considering a lot of people did not like that.
A lot of people, I think the biggest problem people had was that there was no input from the public on any of it. I think that was the problem they had with it. Just put the story about this on the KNSS website myself just a little bit ago. So you can check that out, knssradio.com, if you want to see what we're talking about. But they've decided that they're going to go ahead and, pause it, maybe get some public comment on it. That ought to be interesting.
And I think that there is a little bit of a sports component in this, Jacob. I mean, I think a lot of people didn't like it just because of the colors, right? Like it kind of looked like Missouri colors. And I know that made a lot of KU fans unhappy.
Here's the thing. One, let people vote on a license plate. The states have been doing that for years and years and years and years. Here's three choices. Pick one. Number two, can we license plates don't need to be yellow. If I've got a red car, no offense, Chiefs fans, or if I've got like a green car, it's going to look terrible. No, come on now. Kansas has always had like a color neutral plate. The plates we have now are great. Like they don't make any car look bad. The state of Texas, Tommy, went to a black and white design after they had like the flag and all this kind of stuff. And you're like, it doesn't always look good. Now it's just like it's white with black print. I love it. It's perfect. Like, stop. You make cars look ugly when you have. Well, I don't even know what color that is. Like, what
I don't
are we,
know.
Michigan fans?
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing here?
I really didn't. It didn't really upset me all that much. I have one of the Wichita Flag license plates already,
yeah, I love
so it
those.
didn't really bother me one way or another. I don't really want to look at it on the road if that was what they were going to go for. But I get the outrage. Like if I had a standard plate, I would be upset about it too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not actually upset about it. It was a little shocking to see that they just hammered this through, and it's like,
don't you think that it's funny though that like we cannot agree on anything in this world, but everybody agreed that this license plate is awful?
Yeah. Well, it's just not a good fit for Kansas. It's a decent design, but it's not good for Kansas. It doesn't make any sense for the state of Kansas. Real quick, let's jump to Charlie on the IHOP hotline. We'll get you in, Charlie. Just about a minute here. What's on your mind?
Hey, just real quick about the KC Royals and stuff. I thought that in Eugene or Ewan Kaufman's will that the Royals were not allowed to leave Kansas City at all, even if they're going across the road. Am I not right out on that? Am I correct on that or no?
I don't know. I mean, they can always break a lease. That's it. I don't. There are going to be so many complicated. The problem for the Royals is they're sort of tethered to the Chiefs, and the Chiefs are actually somebody that people will bend over backwards for. The Royals are not, and so they're going to have to beg for the. John Sherman's the one that's going to have to beg. The Chiefs can do whatever they want. The Chiefs will say jump, and everyone will ask how high. The Royals are running into this situation. It's just like. We fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Everybody knows that like a $5 billion baseball stadium price tag isn't a good investment. It's just not.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous on the price tag and stuff. But I had heard a while back. I may be off a little bit on this, but I had heard that in his will that that whoever it is that bought the team that they are not allowed to leave the Kansas City area.
Well, define the Kansas City area, I suppose, too, because you can go across the street and you're in the state of Kansas, but you're in the Kansas City area. So I don't know. We'll have to look into that, Charlie. It's a good point. We'll see if we can't find the answer for you. All right. We're going to come back. We'll take a quick break here. We'll tell you what's on tap the rest of the day. All right, everybody. That does it for a Tuesday. A lot of fun. Appreciate Dan Israel for joining us. If you missed anything from that conversation, you can go to kfhradio.com and check it out. Plenty more fun to come tomorrow. Following us today, Jim Rome, of course, at 11. Bob and Jeff locally 2 to 4. You've got the Chiefs Kingdom show tonight at 6 o'clock right here on KFH before K-State Hoops against Oral Roberts at 7. K-State and KU both get a couple of cupcake games. We'll talk about those tomorrow as we get to the show. Tommy, enjoy the day.
Yeah, sounds good. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
Jad Chambers, Tommy Castor, I'm Jacob Albracht. We'll see you then.